So David Osler and Fabrizio Vettosi to moderate. Thank you, Valeria, for accepting my proposal. You did very well. Then we have Professor Arturo Capasso, economist and a friend, Angelo D'Amato, who is a ship owner but also a very experienced person in ship finance. Giuseppe, unfortunately, is not with us. He has a problem, Giuseppe Bottiglieri, but we have got Massimo Racca, head of sub-performing loan of BPM, and ok, Andrea. Con Angelo. Perché Angelo non è napoletano. Due napoletani. Due napoletani, two Neapolitan, ship owners, not Genoese, okay. Charles Spetka, Managing Director of Fortress Investment Group. Good morning, Mr. Spetka. Hello, where is he? And so please, David, where is David Osler? He's a microphone on. David is there with his computer. Would you like to sit next to Fabrizio, David? Would you mind, or perhaps Fabrizio can go that side? Yes. So the two moderators work together as a team. Sorry. Okay, I leave you in peace, and I will listen to you.
Angelo. Francesco.
Okay. Right. Okay, good morning and welcome to the session on ship finance of the future. And I'll start by thanking all of you for being here. I also need to thank our host, Studio Legale Lauro, for organising this splendid event. We are going to be talking about the future in a moment, but let me start by talking about the past. We meet today in Italy, where 2,000 years ago, Roman orator Cicero famously described finance as the sinews of war. And unfortunately, our sinews seem to be weakening. The latest survey from Petrofin tells us that the shipping portfolio of the 40 largest lending banks fell by $10 billion last year, following a decline of over $40 billion in 2016. The bankers are still lending shipping $345 billion. That's equivalent to all planned investment in the power sector in the Middle East and North Africa for the next 5 years. But even so, the amount of money that is on loan at the moment is now the lowest for 11 years. And that shortfall from the banks is only partially being made up from other sources. My name is David Osler, and I'm a London-based journalist with LloydsList.com, the shipping website. I've covered various aspects of the industry for over 20 years, including especially finance. And with me this morning is Fabrizio Vettosi, Managing Director of Venice Shipping and Logistics, who will moderate this session jointly with me. In the final 10 minutes, Fabrizio will give you a brief presentation.
Sorry, David, but I will go through the panel giving my snapshots. It's better.
Oh, you'd rather
yes,
to do that?
yes.
Yeah, okay. Then last minute change of plan, ladies and gentlemen. Fabrizio and I have 6 very distinguished. Oh, it looks like 5. Has somebody dropped out? The last. Who's Mr. Bottiglieri is missing. Okay. We have 5 very distinguished guests for you. And let me introduce them in alphabetical order. We have, to my left, we have Arturo Capasso, who is an economist, who works as a professor at 3 Italian universities, very impressive. He's also a director of Vettosi, a Naples-based investment company. Angelo D'Amato is the...
He's missing.
He's... Right. Well, Angelo, I hope Angelo is going to join us on the stage. He's the son of another famous Italian shipping family, and
Garolla.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and chief executive of Perseveranza di Navigazione.
This is Angelo D'Amato.
It's Angelo D'Amato.
It's not me.
Is that
Right.
Andrea?
You're instead of Andrea.
Yes, I participated actually to the first session with the young
Right.
owners. Yes, I am here, substituting Mr. Giuseppe Bottiglieri, which is not here. That's
Yes.
the problem.
Okay. We should have, who's next on the list? Massimo Racca. Yes, Mr. Racca is the workout guy at Banco Popolare and has previously worked for a number of other banks. He's also a former director of Telecom Italia. Do we have Enrico Semprebene? Yes, Enrico is senior banker for transport and logistics at BNL and originally trained as an auditor at Arthur Andersen. And finally, Charles Spetka, who is managing director of Fortress Investment Group, which has over 40 billion in assets under management. He's lately been working on Italian restructuring packages, seeking out opportunities for
Angelo is
investors.
coming.
Oh, Angelo's coming, great. Great, so we are back up to a full complement of 6. Okay, no problems. Well, let me start with Arturo, as a well-known economist, right? Many of us read the business pages in our newspapers. It's the first thing we turn to in the morning, and the analysis of the Italian economy and the Italian banking situation is often alarming, even in my own newspaper this morning. So what can you tell us? What's the state of play in Italy?
Well, in general, on the general point of view, I can say that the Italian economy has strong fundamental. We are the second manufacturing system in Europe, just after Germany, and the Italian banks are going through a restructuring process. So typically, what we see now are the problems of a system that is changing, and they are trying to rebalance assets and liabilities, and probably the shipping was one, the shipping companies, the shipping loan have been one of the problems, because in the same period we had 2 circumstances. First, the world crisis, the world financial crisis, and then the changing rules of Basel II and Basel III that changed the scenario of the banking system. As far as the shipping industry is concerned, I think that also the shipping industry is going through drastic change, but I can say the same thing than in general for Italy, the manufacturing system. The basis is strong. We have a strong intangible capital. We have knowledge. We have a maritime cluster that is very strong. So in a way or in another, this kind of competencies, this kind of ability will be the source, will give the Italian system the strength to restart in such a way. The problem is that we are trying to understand what will be the proper attitude, the proper form of this restarting.
Okay, and as the director of an investment fund, how would you assess investor confidence in Italy right now? Can you honestly report that there's an appetite from people in other countries to invest in Italian shipping?
As a matter of fact, the company, I sit in a board of an investment company who has two funds specialized in venture capital. And so venture capital is not so much the proper kind of investment for to invest in the shipping business. The private equity fund, with the private equity fund, we tried to do some in the shipping industry, but probably the shipping industry deserve a special fund for them, because it is not possible to use for shipping industry the same conditions, the same format typically used for industrial companies, for the normal industrial companies. That's why, for example, Venice Shipping and Logistics is a fund, has funds with specific vocation to the shipping industry.
Okay. I've got a question next for Massimo and Enrico, because they are bankers. Obviously, there was a lot of coverage a few years ago about the crisis in the Italian banking system, as it was described. Newspaper readers were routinely told the Italian banking system was even close to collapse. Now, obviously that hasn't happened, so have we had a lucky escape?
Okay. Good morning to everybody. You know that Italian banks have experienced a crisis. Some of them have made something important. As far as our group is concerned, we are the first group that merged. So two groups who merged in the last 2 years, giving something about which we are very proud of having transformed from cooperative system to SPA, and not only to SPA, to a public company, because now we are a public company, not because we have certain limitation in voting power, but because we don't have an anchor investor. So if the question is how in the past this situation has influenced the shipping lending, I don't see any influence. The reason why shipping doesn't have in my opinion, a material weight in the Italian banking system is probably due for historical reason, because the Italian banking system hasn't in the past enough big player, which was created in the last 20 years.
Okay.
Yes.
Enrico.
No.
No, I don't see that there's been a problem from an Italian banking perspective, since all the Italian banks that were alive at that time before the crisis are still alive in a different way. Obviously, there have been a sort of a merger between many banks, but from a general point of view, we can say that the banking system has supported well the economic crisis. So it's fine and it's still alive.
The position of Enrico is quite in the middle, since he worked for a French bank which bought an Italian bank.
Yes, our bank did not have any necessity to make capital increase or to merge with other banks. So.
Maybe let's ask some of the ship owners on the panel then, because I see you want to come in. So, can you borrow the money you need, or can you pay back the money you need?
No, actually, I would also ask for something which, at the end of my speech, can be a little bit revolutionary. Because with Fabrizio, we started long time ago about speaking about the relationship between investors, investment fund, and shipping companies. And I dare say that when everything went good, we were very distant. With Fabrizio, we elaborate some schemes of improvement of our companies by managerialize the small companies. You know, the big companies are already have a path which they follow. Before many of the Italian shipping companies that were in, let's say, still in the small medium size. And so we say then we recognize that at that time the company was mainly based as one-man show, and like the ship owners controlling everything and whatever, and this was not good to attract the investors in our business. We tried to do this path, and we follow this, and we succeeded, because if you take a look at the company now, we have much more young people working in our company, much more skilled personnel, and we started from the matter of fact that a ship owner cannot know everything about everything. Maybe cannot know about the finance as well as maybe technical, the technical side, the crewing. The shipping company is a very complex company made up of many segments. And this is one side. On the other side, as a matter of fact, as was telling before, in this new scenario of the shipping, we need equity, because each investment is heavier and heavier even than before. I said this morning that the role of the ship owners changed a lot. Before, the ship owner was the one able to manage old vessels and new vessels at the same time. Even consider better if you could manage old vessel rather than new one. The new one is so easy, the old one, you take the risk that others cannot take. So now everything starts from the vessel. If you think now, for example, the very innovative vessel, let's say LNG propulsion or dual fuel, scrubber on board, or water ballast, and all these things, and should be very modern. We need to pay attention which shipyard the vessel has been built, because of in case you have to resell the vessel after years. So you need to take care of these parameters that before were not taking into account. Before it's I have the cargoes, I go there, not matter what the ship is. So this is a matter of fact. Why I say that there can be a revolutionary approach? Because what is, I'm asking all the time is why don't either the banks or either the investors, because we have, of course, shipping companies which are suffering at the moment, and which are, with non-performing loans, as well as we have solid shipping companies, both big and small, whatever. But I say, why don't the bank or the investors approach the ship owners saying, why don't we do something together, preserving your know-how? I believe that the know-how of the company should be at the center of the scene. Whether you are in distress or whether you are solid or financially, speaking, you are, quite strong. Because at the end of the day, the ship owner is the one who knows how to manage vessels. So what we understand, since, think about, for example, one point in which of disagreement between the investors and the ship owners was the duration of the intervention of the fund. Because, if you, for example, like example of before, you order a new vessel, it takes 2 years to build, and then the first 2 years passes without any revenue. The first year is the one more complicated, then you have 2 years of good revenues, and then you need to face the way out. So it's something that scares the ship owner. I imagine a world very different, in which the ship owner will say, I am a managing company because I have the tradition of several generations in doing that. Why don't you propose me? Can I buy the vessel, which is the best vessel, you manage the vessel for me, rather than choosing your own structure of management and invading, the field of the ship owners. This, I said, this can be revolutionary. We sat on a table waiting for proposals from investors that say, I want a vessel which is in compliance with all the new rules and regulations, which I can sell all the time, making a profit, no matter what. The ship owner is not, should not be involved in this. this, we are ready, under some extent, also our generation, to be detached by the emotional aspect of I own 3 vessels, 4, 5, 10. I am better if I own more vessels. I am better if I manage the vessel better than the others. Probably this.
Okay. I mean, I hear what you say, but you've mentioned the word revolution several times, and
Because we have never, because the ship owners have never been approached by the propositive way.
But that's what I was going to say. The trouble with revolutions is that they mean the overthrow of the old ruling class. So, do you foresee that the revolution that you wish would erode the power of the great Italian ship-owning families?
As I was telling before, not all the ship owners are ready for this revolution. We are getting, more and more prepared. But, there is no other way sometimes for companies, to grow. We cannot imagine a company which owned, for example, 10 vessels now, we have 15 years, cannot replace probably 10 vessels of 2 years old in a few years' time, because the equity they need is so much intense that also the risk. You need to consider the risk. Families risking his own money, so it's very risking now in the market, which is so variable, and this is not so. We need stability to grow as it was before. Now nobody can understand the future, really. When I talk to the previous generation or I talk to the new generation, really we don't know in 2 years, 3 years' time what really will happen. The cycles of shipping we always talked about are not the same, independently from the duration. So.
Right, but the old owning families would stay in charge?
Sorry?
You think the old owning families would stay in charge?
I believe yes, because we know how to do it. It's our life, it's our job. We know how to do it. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this is a really interesting point.
That's Arturo, the problem. I fully agree. Since the shipping is not only steel, it's also brains.
Yeah, okay, I was going to say this is a very interesting point, and I'd like to keep the discussion going along a bit. So, if anyone else would like to come back on this point,
yes.
Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Another aspect, I think that asset diversification is also more important than in the past, especially because we are experiencing a higher volatility in return and risk in the value. So, asset diversification for the traditional families owning shipping companies is much more important than in the past.
Okay, anybody else got any comeback on this point? Do you agree or disagree?
I would like to elaborate on the future from the banking perspective, because just looking at the past, we just look at companies that have not performed mainly. So we have, we are a listed company, so I can't disclose exact number, but the shipping sector has a danger rate quite important. So why? That's the reason. That's the question that has to be answered.
Can I answer to this? It's quite strange.
I'm very happy.
It's not strange because we are used to it. There are non-performing companies that manage their vessel lots better than performing companies.
Absolutely.
Because the reason was only a matter of timing. They bought vessels when the vessel price was high. Just simple.
Absolutely.
Usually in the industry, we are used to say is non-performing an industry which does not know how to make the product. This is the opposite what happened in shipping. You have performing company which are very, very much skilled, more skilled than performing sometimes.
And the mistakes are also in the side of the banks. So if we have financed in a wrong way or in a time which was not favorable from the chartered cost point of view, of course then we have problem, because we have financing which cannot be sustained by the cash flow. So the lesson learned is, first, considering that we can't predict the top line, because chartered costs are something. I have prepared some slides. I don't know if Regia can present, but if you have a look of the forward the forward chartered cost and the actual cost, no provision can be made.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
so the only way to solve this issue from the bank point of view is to have lower leverage than in the past. It is not so strange that most of the financing that have defaulted, which doesn't mean that they are now in a workout situation. Maybe they are in unlikely to pay situation. They have to be restructured. So I'm not saying that it's a so big problem. It's a problem that has to be managed. But what I want to mean is that at that time, probably during a general bubble, we financed in a wrong way with too much leverage. And now for the future, we have to stay on a different leverage, more conservative, than about culture of shipping. It's an asset that has to be preserved. Managing a shipping company is not easy. You have to manage market, client, supply chain, people, geopolitical trouble when you when you have some situation all over the world. So it's not an easy job compared to certain manufactured company. So the culture, what we call the culture of the district, which is the culture of certain geography, are to be preserved. And from this point of view, having an alliance between an historical entrepreneur and an institutional investor plus a bank is a good, are crucial ingredients.
Can I add? It's working. Sorry, first of all, I was late. Since we have to manage many risks, I have something operational running just now, so I needed to be outside. I will surprise all of you. It's the first time I'm absolutely in full agreement with Massimo Racca, because what he says is exactly the same. So, I mean, the problem of the crisis for the Italian shipping companies, but I would say any shipping company who made investments in the wrong timing, was really that we have invested all our equity first. Let me remember to everyone, to me first, that we put our equity first. So we are now seeing, so we didn't, let's say, screw banks so our money was the first running, and it was family money, because it was not an international or public company. It's family company, traditional scheme, family money put inside. So we have bet all our net worth into this business. And of course, the only problem was the timing. So, and I'm not complaining with Massimo Racca, I know since a while, and frankly speaking, that they have always kept, let's say, a cooperative attitude. So in a way that, let's say, a restructuring must be followed rather than a simply work out. Because it's absolutely true that today these companies are efficient, they are managing relatively well, they are recovering in terms of market conditions. There is just a problem that there is a stock of leverage, which was created in the wrong timing, mistake made by both, which has been handled. What I'm complaining, it's really the rules that Massimo Racca and many other bankers has decided to give and to play. So the run after, let's say, the reduce of NPL and unlikely to pay, it's driving banks, in some cases, some more than others, to decisions which are, in my opinion, wrong. Because this is an industry where a restructuring and stay together, running the business over a certain amount of time, it's by far more efficient than simply decide to dismiss a loan and allow my friend Charles Spetka, let's say, to make some money out of that, or some of them. But of course, we need to look in front of reality. So the reality is that these shipping companies in Italy, which have a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, a lot of know-how, need a deep restructuring. Whether this will pass, we would much prefer that it would pass through, let's say, jointly with the bank in a recovery period over the time. If it is not possible, then we need Mr. Spetka eventually, or someone else. But then at least we would like that this process to be done together. What we really think is the worst thing to be done, and we have seen cases very recently with another banks, not by coincidence, the worst, let's say, the worst managed bank in Italy, Banca Montepaschi. They decided, let's say, to sell at cents by the dollar, most of the shipping position, simply because they were unable, let's say, to manage and to handle, and they were forced by the rules to dismiss the position into companies which were, let's say, potentially making money.
Okay. May I add just a comment on what Angelo said? Remember that according to the calendar, which is a document issued by the ECB, the supervised banks, so the most important bank, 15 in Italy, has to make provision on secured loans in unlikely to pay classification in 7 years if they are secured, or if they are unsecured in 2 years. Then the European Union said that for secured exposure, the provision 100% can be reached in 8 years, but it doesn't change too much. Which is the point? In 7 years, you can restructure a position, for sure. Restructuring a position doesn't mean to reimburse the entire exposure. It's to have the company risanata, we say in Italian, so in condition of having cash flow to sustain the debt.
Right.
This in general. This means that the involvement of banks is to do restructuring in the proper way, unless you are obliged by the regulator to deleverage position. That is another story. We have been obliged to sell NPL starting from the merger between Banco Popolare and Banca Popolare di Milano. This was part of the agreement with the regulator, which covered just the bad loans, so what we call sofferenze. As far as the UTP is concerned, we don't have any constraint. Of course, we do asset management because we don't want to destroy value, just selling if we are covered, because we did a share capital increase in the past, and so we have a lot of money to put in provision. And the point is to do restructuring in proper way. Then, after having signed a restructuring agreement, we have 12 months to monitor the position. If the position is performing, we can reclassify, we can classify back to bonus. So we don't need 7 years. We just need 1 year to restructure, 1 year to monitor, and of course, we have to understand that the position has been really, the crisis has been really resolved. With again, doesn't mean that the debt has to be reimbursed. You just have to have performance in line with the agreement, with the plan. And possibly, for example, if you do a restructuring with all the debt bullet, if you just pay interest after 1 year, you can't reclassify in bodies. But normally, the secure loans are normally, unless in the real estate development, are normally amortizing and are sustained by the cash flow. I beg
thank you very much.
Of Charles.
Very, very quickly, I am keen to hear from Mark, who hasn't spoken yet.
To say, because he's the only happy party at this table.
Hang on, Mark, we'll be with you in a minute.
Let me say that the pity and the funny story is that we see companies which were absolutely unable to serve whatever loans. Because please do not forget that from 2012 to 2017, we were looking with incomes about half of our running costs. So you cannot really, not even imagine to start paying any interest, whatever principal. In a moment where now the companies could eventually sit and agree a real restructuring on a time basis, where the bank has to make some sacrifice, where the company, generally speaking, all this family has made already a sacrifice. Most of the banks now they are looking and with much more interest, let's say, to dismiss these loans, because sometimes it's easier. I'm happy to see Mr. Racca that it's not, because sometimes the decision is not, I'm sorry to say that, Massimo, but I deeply believe in what I say. So even if into the official ideal words, banks are there to create value, the true story is that very often the bank prefers, let's say, to save time. And sometimes to dismiss the sale of the loans is the quickest, dirty and fastest, let's say, possibility. I could tell a precise episode, which eventually I would avoid, otherwise I would get some, how to say, criminal, come si dice, una querela per diffamazione, rischio, diciamo, nei confronti di una banca in particolare.
Okay, thank you very much. Mark, well overdue for a word. I understand you've been coming over to Italy in search of opportunities for your investors. Can you tell us what you're finding out there? Why should investors be interested in Italian shipping?
Let me start by saying my background, I am not a shipping expert. I'm probably the least expert shipping person in this conference. My background is in real estate and in non-performing loans. When I first got involved in shipping, I looked at it and I said to myself, it's a lot like real estate. You have managers, you pay management fees, you have income producing assets, you have charters like leases. And so there's a lot of similarities, but the problem is that it's very different actually, because if I buy a piece of real estate in the middle of Manhattan, I buy the Waldorf Astoria hotel, for example, that hotel occupies a certain space that no other property can ever occupy. If I'm invested in a ship or a vessel, that's a fungible asset to some extent, and so the pricing becomes very competitive, and so prices in shipping are very volatile as a result of the fungibility of the assets. In addition, shipping has, real estate has the same issue to some extent. I mean, there's supply and demand, but supply is not always rational in shipping. It's not always in real estate. Development gets ahead of use. But I think that my sense is that real estate supply is a bit more rational than in shipping. Ships get built, as prices are falling, ships continue to get built. There are reasons why certain countries want to make sure their shipyards stay active, and so they continue to build. So supply doesn't necessarily get into line. And then, thirdly, ships are depreciating assets. Real estate is also, but the Waldorf Astoria has been worth a lot of money for a very long time and will continue to be so. Ships will depreciate over life, and then they'll go to the scrapyard. So all of those things make the price of ships very volatile. And it's not real estate. It can't be financed in the same way. A 50% LTV loan on the Waldorf Astoria is a much different risk profile than a 50% LTV loan on a new LNG, let's not take LNG, on a new MR2, because it's a fund. And so I think this is one of the fundamental issues. And then, when it comes to investing in ships or vessels or companies that run ships, that's not really what we do. I mean, we actually own quite a few vessels at the moment, but we're not long-term investors. I mean, we bought vessels because we think the market's in a particular spot. We thought we bought them cheap to where the market is for some reason. But we're not really our business, and it's not every business, is not a long-term investor in shipping.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Charles.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to, if we've got the time, if time allows, I'm going to come back to you about equity opportunities, especially in the US. But I know the time is counting down, and I know Fabrizio has some questions that he'd like to ask too. So
let me help by my brief snapshots. I can help, and I want to put some questions to Massimo and Enrico, and involving also Angelo. So please start with the snapshots. Okay, so this is, for me, is like a pillars on this slide, since I use it to counter the Mr. Dombrowski when I sit the first time in front of him to discuss about the capital requirement rules in European Commission. So, and this morning I heard a lot of things said about the problem of communication of shipping industry, and Terry McAllister raised the question on the floor about the difficulties for the shipping to communicate adequately with the stakeholders. So, and if I go through these figures, I see that the shipping is not riskier than real estate or other industries, since the level of loss given default done by the shipping is not upper than or higher than the real estate. As well, when the approach of the banker is prudent, so the prudent means that the level of leverage is in the between the 60 and 80%, 60 and 70%, the risk to lose your money is very, very low, since the loss given default is close to 15%. It's not more than real estate or other industry. But the problem of the shipping is the communication. There is not knowledge in the bank system to adequately analyze these industries, in my opinion. And so beforehand, Charles spoken about the high volatility of the shipping, but the shipping is quite wide, and the range of subsectors is very high, and we have some sector at very low volatility, and the other sector, like the traditional Trump sector, like tanker or dry, for what the volatility is very high. This is one point. Second point, situation does not run. Please can go ahead. Yes, this is a situation of the Italian market for shipping. Is that fleet value is close to $34 billion. The total outstanding debt buried on this ship is 14 billion, and the bad loans, the problematic loans, are roughly 7.6. This situation seems to say us that is not bad, since the total fleet value is $34 billion, and the debt buried on the fleet is 14. But it's a misleading indication, since in the $34 billion is included the high value of RoPax, RoRo, and specialized the fleet, mostly owned by one of the main players sitting this floor, is Grimaldi, represented by Diego in the floor. And in the parallel, in the opposite side, the debt buried on this fleet is very, very low. So it's a very well balanced. And if I read the balance sheet of Grimaldi, I see that the leverage is close to 50% probably. So correct me if I'm wrong, Diego is correct. And unfortunately, the problems come from the glut, or for the party of 2006 lived for the bulk sector and tanker sector. So let me show this slide, Angelo, where the value of bulk fleet is close to 1.7 billion of dollars, but the debt, so the fleet is 0.9, but the debt buried on this is 1.7. The loan to value now at current market is more than 189%. And the same we live for the tanker, where on the base of our current market, the level of loan to value is close to 144%. So I like to have to get your opinion about the level of knowledge of Italian banks in the shipping. Is a problem for me, live as advisor or investor, and as well, how you think this is the best way to overcome the problem in order to preserve the huge know-how and knowledge, which is probably the main asset for these industries. For you?
Can I add something? Because then I want to defend a little bit with the poor Italian banks. So you didn't say, I was exactly asking the same, because that's the reason that, so you see that basically all the bulk fleet it's into NPL or UTP and most of the tanker fleet. But the only reason is because, let's say, there were vessels ordered where the market was skyrocketed. But let me say something on top. You are, of course, you know, of course, but it's maybe better that everyone knows. The largest lenders that time that were not absolutely Italian, Germans, French somehow, UK, Royal Bank of Scotland bankrupt, HSH bankrupt, Commerzbank almost bankrupt. So what I'm trying to say, Italian banks and Italian owners, they were in good, let's say, company with Germans, French, UK, worldwide. So it's true that everyone made a mistake. By the way, let's say, we as a family, we thought that the market could change, so we decided in 2010 to fix all our own fleet on 5 to 7 years charter, and at the end of 2012, out of these 19 parties, only one remained alive.
You are touching the other face of the problem, and I leave Enrico and Massimo to reply. So is the lack of knowledge internally of our banks in order to support the industry. As there are two problems. The problem of communication, since probably the ship owners are not able to communicate adequately the business models. And secondly, the ability of the banks to arrange the internal teams dedicated to shipping and all the story in order to face this industry, mostly in the troubles.
Can I say something? Fabrizio, hi. You know, when I looked at the chart, I'm not sure if it's accurate or not, but when I was speaking, I was talking about tankers and bulkers particular because they're particularly commodities. The things that we've invested in, and we have made some investments, typically they're asset classes that have some particular competitive advantage. So we have ferries, we have handy class, we have things that there's where it has an edge, but the commodities we stayed away from a long-term investment because we see a lot of volatility, and so the value, the ship owners and the managers are very important. These are some of the best, and we met some of the best Italian ship owners, and there are many very good Italian ship owners, managers, but the value they bring is sometimes, not always, but sometimes dwarfed by the volatility of the asset. And the asset, so today is a good, in our opinion, we're buying vessels. Today is a good time to buy because we're at a low, particularly in maybe tankers. And I think it's a general opinion people have. Again, I'm not an expert. This is just kind of a firm-wide view. But you're making a bit of a bet on the volatility of the vessel. And then, if we were a buyer, we would hire one of the great managers.
Charles, you are marking a very strategic point for the change of the shipping and looking in the new future of shipping, which was the word heard yesterday, today, since the words of Peppino D'Amato yesterday and also this morning from young ship owners, we have to adapt the shipping to new models. And is a well sound to hear from you that there is a substantial difference between the vulture fund or speculative fund and the turnaround fund. So I am very, very happy to hear your comment about remarking the difference between these different approaches of the financial investors when they approach and stay close to the company in order to help the recovery, or when the approach is only aiming to a speculative gain. Is another, this discussion is the current discussion day by day with Massimo and or Angelo when we have our professional discussion. No, I am interested to hear your comment about.
I can only comment on what we do. Typically, and not just in shipping in Italy, and across our business lines, we typically align ourselves with people who are very good at what they do and have local particular expertise. So the ship owners in Italy or whatever the case may be, to help us find opportunities and work together to create opportunities. And so the value, and we value that expertise quite a lot. And that's across everything we do. We won't invest in an asset class because we have a great manager. We'll find a great manager because we want to invest in an asset class. Here, one of the things we're doing a lot, we're trying to do, it's been with some success, but it's been challenging, is to work with the ship owners and the banks to try to broker a resolution. It's quite complex. I mean, as everybody here knows, I mean, these situations are very complex. And we try to do that in a way that everybody, including us, our investors, wins, and trying to bring a resolution. That's our approach. There are other approaches, but that's what we try to do.
It's interesting that you invest on the brains in order to help the ship owners to overcome the crisis. You invest in the knowledge, as Massimo comment is very, very precious on this topic, in order to overcome the crisis, in order to overcome the bad time.
Yeah,
so
but it's purely selfish. I mean, it's just because we want the best people to work with us. It's not because we're trying to, we're not altruistic. We're not, we're a fund trying to make money. We just think that's the best way to make money.
But preserving culture is not enough. There is a matter of dimension which is to be followed as a strategy. Because from this point of view, there is no difference between a traditional manufactured business and shipping. They have same problem for OPEX, for general and administration cost. So what you said before, what banks can do in order to permit an improvement of the shipping sector? For example, helping consolidation process.
And this is the point, Massimo, and also Enrico, if the banks can help, can easy and facilitate the process of consolidation, since the shipping is changing. Several times, and with Andrea, we comment the change in the business model pattern, where the shipping is becoming a low-margin business where the size is crucial, and the consolidation process may be facilitated by the role played by the banks. So I don't know if you agree, Enrico and...
Well, I would start...
BNP Paribas is one of the few banks which does not downsize their portfolio.
The size of the portfolio.
This portfolio.
What I would like to discuss here also, it's a general view on the Italian ship finance market, because it's quite interesting to see what has happened in the past and what brought to the current situation, because I started 20 years ago.
We never learn from the past in the shipping. Unfortunately.
No, it's useful to understand which is the current situation for the Italian market, from my perspective, in my opinion. So I've heard from Angelo, one of the questions was the lack of experience of Italian banks in supporting shipping companies, which was a fact indeed. When the booming of the Italian companies arrived, they decided to invest a lot of money in shipping. Italian banks did not have the right credit metrics to evaluate the shipping investment. They had more a corporate approach, more than an asset approach.
Okay.
And so many mistakes was done by the banks in that period of time, thinking that lending in shipping was a matter of pricing. At that time, I mean, in the years 2005, 2009, there was a problem of excess of liquidity, so cheap capital to be invested, to be lended.
Okay.
And so the corporate approach was one of the point there, and the excess of liquidity was the other one.
Okay.
At that time, that was the first, the main. The third point was that financing a ship maybe is better than financing a different asset, like say, because obviously the vessel can be moved, has a lot of information on the fleet, on the charter, a lot of data which can be used to evaluate a loan.
The rating,
But
to give the rating.
From legal point of view, it's just a matter of due diligence. So banks cannot be worried about a certain sector because it's complicated from a legal point of view. There is another point that is to be understood. If we have lost 100 million euro in shipping sector, the first answer should not be for the future, I don't want to invest anymore in this sector. The first answer is to be, why I have lost 100 million euro?
Okay.
Where and when I have make a mistake? So it's, I want to do outing from this point of view, but in several occasions I have heard this approach, which is completely wrong, because we have to do bank today, tomorrow, as we did in the past. Our duty to our stakeholders, both people who lodge money in our account, as well as stakeholders, as well as authority, is to do the thing well, is to do correct assessment. So we, just to do an example, just to say that real estate is not so different. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was not working for this bank, but I have learned something in the last year. Our approach was to finance as an average 80% of each initiative, including the land. So land and capex, 80% of leverage and 20 equity. Now we support only 60% of the capex and no financing support to the land, to the area, which means approximately 45% of the overall cost, because we have understood that those leverages were wrong. That's the point. So the solution is not to say, I don't want to play anymore this game because it's too dangerous.
I think that we are going to the, let me say, a combination of sources for shipping coming from the private capital and the traditional capital. And probably the loser on this game, on this pitch, is the public market. And I have a question for Arturo, if you can help me by the slides. You can run the slides?
Fabrizio, are you
So, Okay, okay.
Are you talking just
Arturo, please, one moment. I have to show you some figures,
Yeah.
quite self-explanatory. So, since this is the performance, the public market performances in equity, of the main sectors of shipping on the different horizon. On the 5-year base, the return for main sectors is negative for the wide range, all range of subsectors. Worst performer was the bulk, marked minus 73%. The best, so let me say the best is the LNG with the minus 9%. Yes, the best. So the market, the public market is practically totally disappointed since a lot of investors was eluded by so extraordinary retards. So we leave also a lot of cases of mismanagement and behaviors, and also conflict of interest. The last one was the case of Scorpio Bulk, which invested and baked the capital increase of Scorpio Tanker. Is quite, I have not comment about, let me say. Dramatically dropped also the source of financing. So this is the trend of public issues. Practically, we have not public issues in the last 3 years, and the last one was good bulk foiled, and as well also the breakdown of the different sectors of shipping for capital rise in the public market. You grew at Columbia University. What's your comment about? You grew in the New York financial capital market.
Well, it's difficult to answer to your question simply because the last 7-10 years have been too difficult to be considered as a proper sample. But my idea is that in the stock market, you need a certain critical mass of research, critical mass of analysts, critical mass of interest. If you consider the percentage of the shipping industry listed in the New York Stock Exchange compared to all the rest of the business, is a small portion. There is only one stock exchange that could be considered a specialist stock exchange. This is the Oslo Stock Exchange. It would be interesting to see this data for the Oslo Stock Exchange, not on a general level. As far as Italy is concerned, I can say that we are talking about peanuts,
generally speaking, we have to reflect about the approach to be held when we approach the equity capital markets.
I think that in your talk, in your idea about a new business model, probably there is some room for public market, even if not public equity, at least for public debt. There could be some space for this kind of deals.
I leave you there.
At this point, it's an ideal opportunity to bring back Charles, which I said I would do. Charles, I've heard various opinions on the openings for shipping companies for public debt, for equity in New York. I hear that some people at the recent Capital Link Forum in New York suggested that the lull was only temporary and the opportunities are still there. But you're the expert. How do you see it?
Well, I have to correct. Is this working? No, I'm actually not the expert. I think I established that in my earlier comments.
But you're supposed to be. Would you have an opinion anyway?
Can I say? Can I ask you? I have a reply for you. Fabrizio, can you go on the slide? No, that one. The slide on the market. Yes, the performance. Sorry, go back on the performance. The 5 years performance.
And before
la slide con le performance quella a 5 anni.
This is.
Ok. I mean, opportunities are there. Go on the bulk and see the 1 year to date performance. It's 18%. What I'm trying to say, so anyone who invested beginning of 2000 or September, October 17, made actually, let's say, 20% or maybe more. It's simple. Because, opportunities are there,
But,
and it's just a matter of time.
Angelo, stock market and generally speaking, as my ethical position in the capital market is that the shipping is not gambling. Shipping is an industry. We have to approach the investment in the shipping as an industry, not as a gambling. If I want to do gambling, I go to the betting shop around the corner to play on the soccer matches.
But let me reply on that. I will make Charles' life easier. Charles is here because he knows that 1 year ago it was 25% lower, maybe even 50% in some cases. So they are more opportunistic, let's say, and they see the value there. And possibly now they're willing to enter into this market because they see that eventually something may happen in the tanker business in the near future.
Anyway, this is not asset return, it's the equity return.
Yes, but come on. Say, if you duplicate, it's interesting. If you take the BDI or the BPI or the market moving, and you put on the average, you will show that the performance of the public company is absolutely identical of the performance of the market.
The timing is one of the best.
The timing's running short, but I'm going to go for one last comment.
Yes. Just a few words, because from what we were saying today, we sometimes are losing the view of the shipowning industry like an industry, and we make a parallel, and in a certain way it is with the real estate, but a part is real estate and a part is even more complex than an industry. Correct. It would be very interesting to have actually a slide with the performing vessels in the world. Italian vessels that failed in its target because they were blacklisted as a flag, detained by the administrations, or blacklisted by charters.
Leader in market niches.
We have a flag which is one of the Angelo knows more restrictive, and our vessel performs quite good. So the non-performing loans is something belonging to the past, but exist. So I don't blame the bank when they say I have to recover, the money in some way. But this is the past. And then there is a future of a company which gathered know-how in generations. How we can mix it up, everything. I suggest to do, for example, if I said, and I was listen very carefully to what Mr. Racca said, if a vessel gain value now, I want to sell the vessel because it's my time now, because I supported the industry. And Angelo always said, very, which is the truth, the family also invested this money. So my fear is that if you support the management of a company which is non-performing, only until you sell the vessels, you do not incentivize to grow. So you have to say, if let's mix it up everything. The shipping company can be considered for a period of time as a management company. I will use your company. I sell the asset when it's the right moment. But if I have to buy a new vessel now, because it's a moment, I give to you. So you incentivize to hire new managers, to improve your structure, to give perspective. Because without perspective, there is no growth. This is my humble opinion.
Oh, well, thank you very much. You can always depend on a mainly Italian panel for a lively discussion. So can we have a round of applause, please, for your fantastic... And before you all disappear, can I just say a few words in closing the conference? To my fellow shipping professionals, for those of us who are visitors anyway, it's nearly time to once again say arrivederci to Naples. And as ever at the annual Shipping and the Law event, participants will have learned much in only a short amount of time. The opening remarks from the politicians will have taught us non-Italians more about what is happening in the country, and the insights from well-known Greek and Italian ship owners yesterday morning will give us a sense of where our industry is going in the coming period. We all know that the IMO sulfur cap will be a challenge between now and the start of 2020, and indeed beyond. And it was fascinating to find out how preparations are advancing. In the afternoon, we honoured Francesco Berlinghieri, the Dean of Italian Maritime Law, and we learned more details of his remarkable life. I'm sure I speak for everyone in this room when I extend deepest condolences to his family and to his loved ones for their loss. The places of refuge debate underline the debate we all owe to seafarers who make possible international trade, and it is our duty to minimise the dangers that they all too often face. This morning the youth had their say, and after that we've heard from the lawyers and then the financiers. And so after just 1.5 days, the 9th edition of Shipping and the Law must now draw to a close. At this point, it's customary to say thank you to the organisers of this conference, Studio Legale Lauro. We all owe gratitude, I think, to our generous host, Francesco. Also, I must sing the praises of the SLL team behind the scenes, whose hard work made all this possible. I'm thinking here of Laura, Valentina, and that remarkably talented soprano, Erin, and all the others whose names I may not know. Thanks too to all the speakers, who of course have been too many to name, and to all the sponsors for their kind backing. Lastly, can we show our appreciation for the staff at this magnificent venue, which is so very different from the dreary concrete conference halls that most of us seem regularly doomed to frequent. I don't want to keep anyone from lunch, and then after that, the guided tour of San Lorenzo Maggiore's architectural treasures. But before I go, let me leave you with a quote from one of the great leaders of our industry. To be happy, Aristotle Onassis advised, make sure you are tanned, live in an expensive building, even if you have to stay in the cellar, go out to expensive restaurants, even if you can only afford one drink, and if you have to borrow, borrow a lot. And he should have added, make sure you network at the right shipping conferences. I hope to see many of you again at Shipping and the Law 2019.